At 5 in the morning on June 5, 1944, Private James woke to the sound of rain hammering a canvas roof. He lay still for a moment and listened. Somewhere outside, a wind that had kept the English Channel closed for 36 hours was still blowing. The invasion that was supposed to have happened yesterday had not happened. And for the 150,000 men sealed inside marshalling camps across southern England, the worst thing the waiting had become was not fear. It was another day of it. The sealed camps, codenamed sausages by Allied planners, had held their men for weeks. No passes, no telephone calls, no letters out. Soldiers had been briefed on their objectives using detailed maps, aerial photographs, and plaster-scale models of the beaches and villages they were assigned to take. They knew the name of every road junction, the height of every seawall, the precise depth of the water at each hour. What they did not know was when any of it would actually begin. The postponement of June 5th had arrived the previous afternoon like a physical blow. Ships already at sea had received orders to turn back. Men who had spent the night before in final prayer or final letter writing or simply staring at the underside of the bunk above them found themselves back in their cots with an additional 24 hours and nothing to put inside them. By 6 in the morning, the camps had resumed their strange rhythm. Men cleaned weapons that were already clean. They sharpened knives that already held an edge. Card games started without enthusiasm and dissolved before anyone finished. A soldier later described it as feeling like the hour before an exam that kept being rescheduled. The knowledge was there, the preparation was done, and the mind had nowhere left to go. 40 miles away, the weather briefings at Supreme Headquarters had told a different story. At approximately 4 in the morning, Royal Air Force meteorologist Group Captain James Stagg had presented General Dwight Eisenhower with a narrow window in the storm system. A brief interval of calmer weather, perhaps 36 hours, might allow the operation to proceed. Eisenhower sat with his senior commanders in the library of Southwick House near Portsmouth and listened. Then he sat quietly for nearly a full minute. When he spoke, it was 2 words: "We go." Back in the marshalling camps, the order arrived in fragments. A change in tone from the sergeants, sudden urgency in the motor pools. By mid-morning, the word had moved through the tents without being officially announced, the way decisive information always moves through armies, laterally, person to person, faster than any official channel. The afternoon of June 5th became a different kind of waiting. Final equipment was issued. Each infantryman received assault vests, ammunition, grenades, 48 hours of rations, waterproofing compound for weapons, anti-seasickness tablets, and a small envelope of French francs. Medics reviewed wound treatment in brief, practical sessions that nobody wanted to pay close attention to, but everybody did. Chaplains moved through the camps and found lines of men outside their tents that stretched longer than any Sunday service. Some received communion. Others simply wanted to sit somewhere quiet with another person for a few minutes without speaking. The chaplains understood. They sat. Letters written in those hours were sealed and held by postal officers with instructions not to deliver them until after the operation was underway. Many of the men writing them were not entirely sure who they were writing to. They wrote to mothers, to wives, to younger brothers back home. Some wrote to no one in particular, as if the act of putting words on paper was simply a way of insisting they were still there, still themselves, still the person the letter described. By early evening, Eisenhower himself was moving through the airfields. At Greenham Common in Berkshire, paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division had finished blacking their faces and were preparing to board the C-47 transport aircraft that would carry them across the channel. Eisenhower walked among them without ceremony, stopping to ask names, hometowns, what units men belonged to. A correspondent present recorded that the general's expression did not change as he moved through the crowd, though his eyes carried something that soldiers would describe differently in different accounts over the years. Some said he looked confident, Others said he looked like a man who understood precisely what he was asking of them. The paratroopers themselves had been transformed by equipment and camouflage paint into figures from another register of experience entirely. Men who had been playing cards 6 hours earlier now stood in full combat load, parachutes fitted, weapons locked, faces darkened, waiting for engines to start. The psychological distance between that afternoon and this moment was not measured in hours. At 10 in the evening, the first C-47 transports began rolling down runways across southern England. Then more, then hundreds. The sound built over the countryside until it was no longer a collection of separate engines, but a single sustained pressure in the chest. People in villages across Wiltshire, Hampshire, and Dorset came to their windows and looked up into a sky crossed with navigation lights. They understood without being told. Some of them stood at their windows for a long time after the sound faded. On the ships, the infantry waited differently. The crossing of the English Channel under the conditions of early June 1944 takes approximately 5 hours. The men of the assault waves spent those hours in the holds of landing craft that pitched and rolled through the residual swells left by the storm. Waterproofing on weapons failed in many cases. Engines overheated. Men were seasick in numbers the planners had anticipated, but had never quite believed until now. Some slept in shallow and unlikely intervals. Others sat with their backs against steel hull plates and recited things to themselves in the dark. Prayers, home addresses, the names of people, things they planned to do when it was over. At 15 minutes past midnight, the pathfinders of the airborne divisions crossed the French coastline and began marking drop zones in the darkness below. At 5:23 in the morning, the naval guns opened. The men in the landing craft heard it before they felt it. A sustained rolling thunder coming from the direction of the coast, enormous and distant all at once. And then they felt it through the hull, through the water beneath the hull, through the floor of the boat, and up through the soles of their boots. The sound the world makes when someone has decided to change it by force. H hour was 30 minutes away. The ramps would drop at Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juneau, and Sword in a matter of minutes. Behind those ramps stood men who had been awake for most of the past 24 hours. Men who had cleaned their rifles in a Hampshire tent that same morning, who had stood in line outside a chaplain's tent that same afternoon, who had heard Eisenhower's order move through the camp like a current, and understood that it meant today was the day after all. What they carried in those final minutes was not strategy or ideology or any of the clean categories history would later press on to what they were about to do. They carried home addresses and the image of a specific face in a specific kitchen in a town they were not certain they would ever see again. They carried their own names, which felt heavier than they had the day before. 24 hours earlier, they had been lying in camp cots listening to rain. Now the ramp was about to drop.